In today's world, it's actually a necessity that you as a UX designer must be able to code. So you might ask yourself, well, but how should I get started with coding? And I will give you an easy answer to that question, because I would say that you should start with web development first, with HTML, CSS, JavaScript, PHP and SQL. And this will probably be a series of videos, and today we will go into web development. As I said before the intro, it's a necessity that you as a UX designer must be able to code, because there are always more and more interfaces that actually require some software. You of course have websites, you have mobile applications, you have native applications on your Mac or on your Windows PC. You have displays in washing machines nowadays, you have complex coffee machines and so on. And therefore, you as a UX designer must have the knowledge on how coding is done and what the key principles are. Everything is becoming more and more digital, and you have more screens than ever before. I don't necessarily say that this is a good trend, but that's how it is. So let's get into web development today. So how should you get started with coding? Well, of course, as I've said before, we will go into web development today, and therefore we need to start with HTML. I will show you some codes within the screen during this video, but I will not go into the very details of it. So with the sample of HTML that I'm showing you here, you can see that you have a clear hierarchy of the different elements. They are placed inside each other. So we have an open tag with the H1 and a close tag with the H1 for the headline, with the P tag for a paragraph and a section tag, for example, that shows that this is one section block. HTML in general is the skeleton or the structure of your website. So this one needs to be set up properly. You can find all the different tags online. I don't want to go into the very details today. I want to give you a rough overview only. Once you're done with your general structure or hierarchy with HTML, you can move on one step further over to CSS. And that one is used to actually, style your website. So you can create different themes, you can create different styles, and simply manipulate the appearance of your website. What you can do with CSS is that you can style different tags. So you can say that every H1, every headline 1 has a certain style, so that it uses a different font, for example. And you can add different classes to your HTML file. And with those classes, it's easier in CSS to manipulate multiple elements of also different tag categories to actually give them the same appearance. What's also possible is that you can add different IDs to elements. So every element can only have one ID, and every ID can only be used once in every HTML file. But the ID can also be used again in the CSS file to manipulate or style only that one specific element. And another thing I want to mention about CSS is that you can already start with some animations with CSS3. The last language that you need to know when we talk about web development that runs inside the browser or gets shown from the browser is JavaScript. And that one is used for multiple different use cases. So it is possible with JavaScript to load different contents from an API that can then be placed inside the HTML. So you can add HTML elements, you can remove some of them, you can manipulate the website with JavaScript, so you can actually create different animations. And that is why you can and should add JavaScript at the very end of your web development process. With JavaScript, it's also possible to add and remove different classes of your HTML text, so therefore you can manipulate their appearance very easily. What I've spoken about before was the basic web development. So we had HTML for the structure of your website, we had CSS for the style of your website, and we have JavaScript for the manipulation of your website contents. But we don't only want to create some basic web development, we want to do the advanced stuff. And therefore, I would suggest you to also learn PHP and MySQL or SQL in general. With PHP, you have way more possibilities when we talk about implementing websites because you can include files within each other. So you can have the menu in a separate file, for example, and include it in every site that you need it. You can actually create connections to a database, which I will come back to later. You can create multiple conditions. So if you have a male person, for example, you can use Mr. And if you have a female person, you can use Miss. And of course, you can have loops. If you want to print multiple different news underneath each other, for example, that can be done with a for or a while loop, for example. And this is all possible thanks to PHP. All the data that you print on your web page will not be stored anywhere. It will probably be within a database. So therefore you need to have a basic understanding of SQL. And SQL offers you to execute CRUD statements. So you have a create statement. So you can create a new entry of a news, for example. You can read the news from your database and print it into someone's browser. You can manipulate it. You can update the news. And of course, you can also delete the news. And therefore, SQL is also an important element if you want to get started with coding, because PHP combined with SQL makes it possible for you to connect to a database and print whatever data is stored in there. And why would you use the approach on web development that I have shown you today? That you begin with HTML, you add some CSS, and then you only add JavaScript on top. Well, the answer is actually pretty easy. The moment you have a clean HTML structure, it is possible that users can use different features like the screen reader of their browser very easily. So therefore your website is more accessible. Furthermore, it is a clean approach and therefore it is also good for search engine optimization. Also, I would not advise you to build your web page entirely based on JavaScript, because the moment a browser has disabled JavaScript or a user has disabled JavaScript within their browser, in that moment your website will not function anymore at all and nothing will be visible. So therefore I really ask you to use that approach, build some clean HTML, add some CSS, and in the end add some JavaScript on top like with sprinkles on a cake. And in the next video, I will show you how you can get started with Java development and why it is beneficial for you to have some web development knowledge in advance. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked that video, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, turn the notifications bell on, and also hit the like button. And I will see you on Thursday.